Alright guys, so now we're going to work on the final part of our project. We're going to work on the option for if the user selects create. So let's take a look at the requirements for this option. Alright, so in this part of our program where it says if the user types in create, the program should do the following. So it should ask them what the password that they're creating is for. So an example could be like TikTok, Twitter, whatever they're using it for. And then after it asks for that, it should ask them how many uppercase letters should be in their password, how many lowercase letters, how many numbers, and how many special characters should be in their password. And then once it has all of that, it should generate a password using that information for the user and store it in our dictionary. Alright, so before we add any new code to help finish our program, let's review our program as is and see what we've accomplished so far. So the first thing we'll talk about is lines 1 through 5 right here. So in lines 1 through 5 we have our dictionary, and a dictionary is a collection data type. It's used to store multiple pieces of data in one area. So in this case we're using it to store our password because remember we're building a password manager. So our dictionary is where we store all of our passwords. So as you can see right here, it has the following key value pairs. It has Facebook and Sky345, Google and the password for Google, and then Reddit and the password for Reddit as well. So that's our dictionary, and we use that to store our passwords. The next thing we have in line 7 is the variable called user choice and the input function. So in this case, we're using the input function to ask the user what they want to do. We give them three main options: create to create a new password, store to store an existing password, and check to check for a password that they've already stored. And then in our conditional statements from lines 9 through 20, we handle 4 conditions. In line 9, we handle the condition for if the user types create. So this is line 9. And if the user types create, currently we don't do anything. That's what we're going to do next. But if the user types create, the code is run right here. Else, if the user types store, we run these lines of code. So in these lines of code, we ask the user what the password is for using the input function. And then we ask the user what the password is, again using the input function. And then finally we store the password in our dictionary as a key value pair. And in the next one we respond to the user typing check. So in this case we ask them what the password is for, and then we check the dictionary for the password and output that password. And the final one is just for if they type anything else. We also haven't finished this part yet, but we will in this next part of the video. Alright, so what I've added now in lines 10 through 15, let me just highlight that. In lines 10 through 15, I've added code that will be triggered if the user types in create. So here we have an indented block of code from line 10 to 15, and it is in this conditional statement. So this says in line 9, if user choice is equal to create, then do all of this. So if the user types in create, we're going to ask them what platform their password is for, and then we're going to ask them how many uppercase letters they want in their password in line 11. Next, we'll ask them how many lowercase letters they want in their password, and then how many numbers do they want in their password, and then finally how many special characters do they want in their password. So after we have all this information, now we can go ahead and generate their password. And to do this, we're going to make a function, and we'll do that in the next step. Alright, so off camera, I've gone ahead and I've added the function. So the function makePassword is all the way from line 27 back up to line 7. So 20 lines of code. But before I explain the function and before I show you why we need the function, I'm going to just show you the rest of the code so you can get an idea of how this change affected the code. So before the password, we still have our dictionary, user passwords, And after the function, we still have our user choice. So user choice is where we ask the user again what they want to do. Do they want to store? Do they want to create? And do they want to check? So that hasn't changed. And then we have our conditional statements, for if the user types create, if they do store, and if they do check, and finally if they do anything else. So the only thing that's changed is that we've added the function right here in line 7 all the way to 27. That's all that's changed. We've only added the function. So now let's take a quick closer look at our function and how it works. So the function starts in line 7 where we have the def keyword. So we always need the def keyword to tell Python that we're defining a function. After the def keyword, we have the name of our password. I just call this one make password. The name doesn't matter, it's up to you. I just chose make password because the function makes password, so the name was pretty straightforward. And then inside the brackets, we can see the parameters, right? So remember, parameters are what we pass into the function for the function to do something. So in this case, the parameters that I'm passing in are the platform. So what is the password being created for? Uppercase count. How many uppercase letters do you want in your password? Lowercase count. How many lowercase numbers do you want in your password? Number count. How many numbers should be in your password? And special count. How many special characters should be in your password? The next thing I have is import random. This is what I will use to randomly select uppercase letters, lowercase letters, numbers, and symbols to generate a random password. The next thing I have is a few lists. So in line 9, I have a list containing uppercase letters. Now from this list, I'll make random selections to add to the password. In line 10, I have a list containing lowercase letters, and I'll do the same thing here. I'll make random selections. In line 11, I have a list of numbers. Same thing, I'll make random selections from this list. In line 12, I have a list of symbols. Same thing, a random selection of symbols. The next thing I have in the function is line 14. I have password, and if you see, it's initially set to a blank string right here. So our password is blank initially before we create it, but we need somewhere to store the password as we make it. So this variable, password, is where we'll store our password as we create it. So from line 8 to line 14, those are the things that we'll use to create our password, and line 14 is where we will store our password inside the password variable, this right here. Now the next part of our function is where we actually create the password. So line 16 all the way down to line 23 is where we create the password. So line 16 says for n in range uppercase count. Well, this is a for loop, and what it's doing is it's saying do this, line 17, do this for uppercase count number of times. So let's say, for example, the person wanted 5 uppercase letters in their password. It would repeat this 5 times. And what this does is it chooses a random letter from the uppercase letter list, this list right here. It chooses a random letter from that list and adds it to the password variable. So you can see how if I wanted 5 random uppercase letters in my password, it would choose them one by one and just add it to my password and then move on. Now the next for loop does the same thing, except it's doing that with lowercase letters. So it's saying how many lowercase letters do you want? And then it's adding random lowercase letters to add up to that amount. The next thing we'll see is the same thing for number count. And this one just adds random numbers from the numbers list, this list right here. And finally, we have the same thing being done for symbols. So this one just adds random symbols from this list right here. So after the password is generated in lines 16 to 23, the function tells the user the password for the platform is, and then it shows them the new password that was created. And then in line 26, it stores that password inside the dictionary. And afterwards, finally, in line 27, it lets the user know that the password has been saved. And that is our function. So now that we have our function, the next thing to do is actually make use of our function. So we create the function right here in line 7, and the definition of the function ends right here in line 27. So we've made the function, but now we need to call the function. So let's go back to our create condition and see how we can call the function. So the first thing to call a function is to type the function name. So in our case, our function name is make password. And don't forget the parentheses. Now the next thing is to consider is whether or not our password takes in parameters. And our password does take parameters. It takes in the platform, the amount of uppercase letters, the amount of lowercase letters, the amount of numbers, and the number of characters. So luckily we have all that here. The platform is there, so we'll just type in platform. We have the number of uppercase letters, upper count. We have the number of lowercase letters, lower count. We have the number of numbers, number count. And we have the number of special characters, special count. So we called the name of the function, and then we passed in the correct parameters. So with that, our create function should be working. Our create condition is then done. So now we can test our function to see if it's working.